Jason Elwood was the kind of man no one ever suspected, soft-spoken, reliable, invisible, in the best way. But Daniel Reeves, the man he used to be, left behind a house in ashes, 2 dead parents, and a trail of unanswered questions. When Jason vanished without a trace, one quiet October morning, it was indeed just a missing person case. It was the return of a ghost from a life he buried, and someone wasn't willing to let him stay buried for long. Jason Elwood had always blended into the background of Holland Ridge, a town where everyone knew each other and strangers stood out. He lived a quiet life on the outskirts, in a small white house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Nothing about Jason drew attention. He taught 7th grade history at the local middle school and kept mostly to himself. He jogged every morning, rain or shine, taking the same narrow trail that led into the dense woods behind his house. Neighbors would wave as he passed, and he'd return the gesture with a polite nod. Routine defined his life. Predictable, steady, safe. That's why his disappearance sent shockwaves through the town. On the morning of October 14th, 2021, Jason didn't show up for work. At first, no one panicked. People thought maybe he'd come down with something. But when he missed the faculty meeting that afternoon, he never forgot his colleagues began to worry. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. Emails were left unread. That night, a coworker stopped by his house and knocked. The porch light was off, and no one answered. His car was still in the driveway. Everything looked normal, too normal. By the next morning, with still no sign of Jason, the school alerted the local sheriff's department. Officers arrived at his home and conducted a wellness check. The front door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle inside. His coffee maker was still half full, and a mug sat on the kitchen counter with a ring of dried coffee inside. His bed was neatly made, and nothing seemed out of place. It was as if Jason had simply stepped out and never returned. Then they checked the back trail. The wooded path Jason jogged every morning was quiet, covered in fallen leaves and pine needles. A quarter mile in, something caught an officer's eye. Lying just off the trail was a single boot, partially sunk into the soft earth. It was a brand Jason orphan wall, and it was caked in fresh mud. The oddest part, the boot looked deliberately placed, not tossed or lost. It stood upright, balanced just enough to suggest someone wanted it to be found. Search teams were deployed that afternoon, combing the forest with dogs and drones. But they found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no other items of clothing. It was as if Jason had been swallowed whole by the forest. News of his disappearance spread quickly. Posters went up around town. Local news covered the story, and concerned residents gathered for nightly search parties. But days passed with no leads, no sightings, no clue what had happened after Jason stepped onto that trail. As the search stretched into its second week, questions began to surface. Why would someone like Jason disappear without a trace? Had he been taken? Had he run? Or was something even more sinister at play? In a town that prided itself on being peaceful and safe, the sudden and silent vanishing of Jason Elwood cracked something open, something dark that had been hidden just beneath the surface. The early stages of the investigation into Jason Elwood's disappearance yielded little progress. Detectives had few leads, and the public grew restless. But everything changed when a deeper background check on Jason was ordered. What came back was not what anyone expected. Jason Elwood didn't exist prior to 2016. No high school records, no birth certificate, no tax history. It was as if he had been born at 30 years old when he appeared in Holland Ridge. The discovery sent investigators into a quiet panic. They had been looking for a missing man who legally hadn't existed for most of his life. After weeks of careful digging, they uncovered the truth. Jason Elwood was an alias. His real name was Daniel Reeves. Born in Boise, Idaho, as Daniel, he had lived a different life, one that ended in scandal and suspicion. 5 years earlier, his family home in Idaho had burned to the ground in a devastating fire that killed both of his parents. At the time, Daniel was 25 and living with them. He escaped the flames unharmed, claiming he had been asleep in the basement and had Dan T. realized the fire had started until it was too late. Investigators found inconsistencies in his story. There were whispers of tension between Daniel and his father, who had reportedly been strict and controlling. Rumors circulated, and although the fire was officially ruled accidental, some suspected foul play. The case didn't lead to any charges. There wasn't enough evidence. But Daniel's reputation was destroyed. Within months, he disappeared, leaving behind his job, his friends, and everything tied to his past. He became a ghost until he re-emerged in Oregon as Jason L. When Highland Ridge authorities discovered the truth, they were stopped. The friendly, soft-spoken school teacher had been living under a false name for 5 years, hiding a history he clearly didn't want anyone to find. His new life had been carefully built. New documents, a new identity, and a personality scrubbed of any trace of Daniel Reeves. But now, all of it was unraveling. The revelation ignited new theories. Maybe someone from Daniel's past had discovered his whereabouts and come to settle a score. Or maybe Jason had feared that moment for years and planned his disappearance to escape it before it caught up with him. Some even suggested he had orchestrated the entire thing to vanish again, just as he had before. Jason's colleagues at the school were blindsided. They had known him as a quiet, responsible man, hardly the type to fake an identity. But questions multiplied as more of his past was revealed. His resume had been entirely fabricated. His teaching credentials were forged. Every detail of Jason's life had been carefully constructed to bury Daniel Reeves. The investigation took a new direction, shifting from a missing persons case to something more complex. Jason wasn't just missing, he was a man running from a life cloaked in mystery and death. And the more detectives uncovered, the more